changing, right? Or because of the geopolitical changes which are going on. It is also because with each of these trends, what's also coming into perspective is the expectations of the leadership is constantly changing, right? Gone are the days where you, meaning we would be happy to say that, I've got a charismatic leader or I've got a servant leadership style or any of those coming into picture. Today, leadership is about making sure that you've got the right talent around you and they are the ones who are going to be distributing the leadership responsibilities amongst themselves and then walking along that path of success. Which I think it also begs me to bring about the point that you keep talking about in terms of organizational networks. I think today those organizational networks play a significant role when we have to start looking at what is going to be defining the success parameters of leaders or individuals or organizations, right? Because the networks are not just relevant within an organization, but it is networks for the industry or for the geographies that we are talking about. Uh, Today, if I have to get uh, myself to be successful within my organizational context, if I do not have the right networks built across the organization, there would be roadblocks time and time again. And you need support from some of these mentors, coaches, and your networks who are going to help you deal with those situations as we interface on an ongoing basis. So I think the times are changing. With that, the expectations are changing, and the complexities of what we are dealing with are also going through a significant shift. And it is some of these learnings which come very, very handy. And it is also the ability to lean in on some of your peers, colleagues, bosses, uh, people who work for you, because the learning and any of those ideas can come from any of those streams. And what's absolutely expected is I should be willing to take that gift and leverage that to make sure that, it is helping the organization move forward and helping to move an agenda forward as far as the individuals or the organization is concerned. So I think it is getting complex, but it is also easy if I'm willing to lean in, if I'm willing to reach out for help. It is available in plenty. I just need to know how to leverage those networks that we have created over a period of time.
Okay. I'll have one more question generally about the industry, then we will get into a personal stuff. I know, because I know you, that you don't like the term GCC to be called. For the others, we use this term called the Global Capability Center and many. And I'm always curious, what would you call if you were to rename this and say what NASCOM and other people are talking is not really the one? If you want to rename, I don't think you will just call it bank, because would
Yeah.
you differentiate? That's my question.
So I think we've got this ongoing debate, and um, Arindam, who both of us know, I work with him right now. He always keeps saying that, why can't we just call ourselves as another office of the bank or the entity that we work for? Because the moment you start to look at defining the office structure, it also drives the behavior and drives the response to a situation that we are talking about, right? GCCs by definition is it also brings along with it some of the I would say factors like, is it a cost arbitrage center? Is it a service provider center? Is it something which is defined for a COE, which is very categorically driving and defining what we need to be doing? I think so. And there's nothing wrong in any of these things which are being described, but what it does tend to do is restrict the scope of what the capacity and the capability is available as far as the talent is concerned, right? I'm also a firm believer that, whenever you have to be part of a broader organization, unless you have the commercial orientation and the business context, you keep working on some of these aspects, your delivery also gets restricted, and it is not necessarily challenging the broader context of why the organization exists and how it is going to be successful. Because in that case, I'm basically saying my objective or my remit is defined as A to B, and I've delivered between A to B, and I'm now waiting for something else to come through. But when you're talking about being another office location of an organization, there you are part of front and center of the critical conversations which are happening, which may lead an organization to growth, or it may be about survival in a certain geopolitical scenario or situations that you're talking about. You're not restricting your participation to a defined objective, but you are saying that, this is I am front and center of whatever is happening in the organization. By definitions, uh, circle of influence much larger than what it can be. Otherwise, it is going to be very, very difficult to expand that circle of influence and also broaden your own horizons, as the case may be, which I think as leaders, we are expected to constantly challenge ourselves, because I can't at any point in time say I know everything that I need to know as far as the function is concerned. I'm sure there are newer things that I would need to learn or unlearn, as the case may be, because the context keeps changing. So I think it is in that context we try to challenge ourselves to say, I've got a broader role to play. If I'm going to just say that, we are here to deliver cost plus business, we are going to be very, very restrictive in our thinking and the way we drive outcomes. So I think that's where we keep challenging ourselves and keep challenging our colleagues to not box ourselves in the way we need to think.
Got it. Thank you so much. In fact, I read an article yesterday in The Economist, and where the lady was trying to argue that the direct influence and the power CEOs have had in the past is reducing, and most of the time is spent on influencing stakeholders, board, and the senior leaders. Now, with this, come to this the main theme when you said when the lines are blurred, right? Where organizations, one side, starting from Frederick Taylor, is the need was to make the lines clear so that everybody know what to do. Now we are talking about when lines are blurred. Could you give us a sense of, you know, when would you say and why would you say situations where the lines are blurred that way?
Um, I'll just take a pot shot at it, Santosh, given that, you age as you grow up the ladder. I'm sure you also tend to start wearing glasses. When you remove glasses, either you automatically are starting to blur the vision that you have, right? So when you are starting your career or in the middle of the career, the lines are pretty clear, because that's what is driven and defined by the job descriptions. But as you grow further in your career, the job description is just for the sake of it, but you do end up doing a lot of things which are outside of that, because that's the nature of the role that one is starting to do. I think the lines start to blur when it starts to blur on a couple of aspects. One, I think the most important one in my mind is culture, because every global organization tends to have a culture which is it's a global culture that you try to deploy locally in different contexts.
Can you mute? Yeah.
And when we try to drive that, there are certain things which work very well and certain things which need to be adapted. So I think this is where the lines start to blur. When we then start talking about what are the key objectives that an organization is wanting to drive, how do you break those down into, at the end of the day, what does it mean and how does it translate to the lowest common denominator as far as the organization is concerned? So I think it starts to blur at various factors: culture, objectives, the sole purpose of why does the organization exist, and what is going to make you look successful or not so successful. It is also about, I think, the culture also drives whether the organization is uh, primarily people centric, people driven versus organization where uh, you are willing to have conflict led organization. And I'm saying conflict led is not a bad thing. At least you are not pushing things under the carpet. You're willing to bring it out in the open and have an open dialogue, which also is driven by the culture that the organization wants to drive and derive from. So I think when lines start to get blurred, the whole, meaning my personal learning has been that you need to start engaging much more with individuals that you're going to be working with. A host of us would have experienced that you tend to have more meetings as a precursor to the meeting and after the meeting, just to make sure that the context in which a discussion is being led is not being misunderstood, right? There used to be programs in communication. How do you drive communication? Um, I was brought up by certain training programs where every time you were making a statement, the qualifier of that statement needed to be, I am just trying to corroborate. I am just trying to uh, understand this is what is being said. So you are not letting the recipient prejudge that you've not made the right sense of what was actually communicated, right? So I think as the stakes become higher, as the number of constituents increase, the complexity in a discussion, in a relationship, or in a organization keeps on increasing. And that's where lines start to get blurred. And here I have seen some of the best leaders that I would emulate as role models. There are different styles again, depending on the organization. I've seen leaders who've been extremely direct in calling out a spade a spade. That worked for them. Uh, in some other organization, I've seen leaders who know that that style is not going to be working, and that's where they would go around uh, not uh, not trying to push a point, but then trying to build consensus to still get to the same outcome, right? So I think the lines start to get blurred because of various factors. Like I said, culture, style, leadership, agendas, and a context and a situation. All of those will add to it. The key is how are we going to be adapting to each of those situations, uh, both from a culture standpoint as well as from a stylistic standpoint, to contribute and see how you can make it more clearer for a larger part of the population. Because at the end of the day, what you do not want is uh, if the blurring of lines is limited to a few, that is still manageable. But if that becomes a larger part of the organization, then we are sitting on a problem which is very, very difficult to solve. And that's where the agendas or the objectives of the organizations get challenged and the delivery suffers as well.
Thank you. So when you say the lines blurred, in the kind of industries that we are in, is this whole because your connection, your constituents whom you're leading, and the connections are not only in one location? Yeah, yeah. You're trying to influence or connect or manage people who are in other part of the world. Similarly, we also have this vertical connections and the horizontal connections that happen at a site level, geography level, to our colleagues who are our peer level, who drive multiple functions, and they have their priorities. They do have their vertical interest to those functions who could be in US, Europe, and other places. Does it also add to this whole concept of lines get blurred?
Indeed, Santosh, and I think that's a very, very critical aspect of working in global matrixed organizations, right? There are very, very different forces at play, and when you are talking about a mixed matrix organization, people representing a specific function versus a region or a function globally, each of them have got their own objectives, but they also have to make sure that, how are we interfacing with each other, and how do we understand the perspectives on the ground from each of these constituents for us to be able to make a fair judgment, right? And a fairness here is also determined by who's the recipient of that information or input which is coming through. Uh, and I think at the end of the day, the best thing which has worked is is there a fundamental trust in the relationship? I think it boils down to that, because rest of the stuff is still manageable. But if fundamentally Santosh and Sunil have a trust, and somebody comes and tells Santosh that I heard Sunil saying this about you, what's your first reaction? Your first reaction is, I know Sunil well enough to not believe what you're saying is 100% true, but I'm sure there was a context behind it. So you are at least willing to give me a some bit of credit to say, I don't know of Sunil doing this kind of stuff, right? Because there is that fundamental trust that exists. But if that trust does not exist, what it starts to do is creates that confusion within that relationship. And if I again go back to some of your sessions, Santosh, where we keep talking about emotional bank balance, we make deposits and we make withdrawals. And I think it is pretty well understood that withdrawals are faster than the deposits. And it just takes possibly one miss understanding. I'm not even saying it was intentional or not, which leads to significant withdrawals, including closure of an account, right? So I think it becomes so some of this is really fundamental to the core. And at the end of the day, it boils down to human interactions and human relationships, which is what drives some of this bit. We may just try to have a wrapper around what causes the organizational complexities, but at the end of the day, it boils down to, um, am I regarded as a leader of integrity? Do I have the trust which I have built over a period of time? And fundamentally, do I encourage people to have the ability to have open conversations as part of those interactions and relationships? I think it boils down to that. Um, we may find reasons why things get blurred, but I think I'm also a believer that, whenever I have to look at any relationship where I may have contributed to it working well or not working well, I always look at myself and how else I could have made it better, because there's nothing else under my control. So I'm trying to mix multiple pieces, but I'm ultimately bringing it back to saying it boils down to human interactions and our integrity and trust, which makes it work or not.
Thank you so much. In fact, the last 1 week I've been just exploring this concept with a bunch of people on a concept called source credibility. How do you trust a message? So what we found finally is three things: credibility of that person, two, trust that that person experience in the system, and third was an interesting one that we might not like to give credit to, but it's called likability. So, do I like to hang around with somebody? So I found that the credibility come from expertise, knows the stuff that he or she talking about. The trust comes because I'm socially connected. I care for you. I create that atmosphere. I keep the channels open. I have integrity. So they all add to the trust. And likability is a mixture of things where we feel like I like to spend time with this person. This person may have the best interest, and I was wondering, one side, most leaders whom I talk about these things are important. But on the other side, when we look at what are the leadership competencies that we want to develop, we get a bunch of things like strategic thinking, growth mindset. On one side, we are fundamentally looking at those things. And other side, so I think there is a huge disconnect between what researchers come up and tell and write books and what leaders really experience within their organization. So thank you for bringing that core principle. Now I have only one question before I open up to the group. Over the years, as you moved up, and I see that you still don't use specs, and I know that you're also not using the what is that you put inside your eyes, this
Lens.
lenses, and still you feel that you have become quite good in navigating blurred scenes, which is, so what are three qualities or something that helped you in being in this, helping you navigate, making you feel good that I'm doing what I could do?
I think it's a very pertinent question, Santosh, and thanks for putting me on the spot on that one. Um, I think I would definitely want to acknowledge the leaders that I've worked for, because most of this, what I'm going to talk about, I've learned from them, right? I've had significant role model leaders who've been there to demonstrate that a leadership position is, you are a custodian till such time you've been entrusted with that responsibility. It's not yours for keeps. Um, and I think if I can again bring in a humor element of it, when I uh, left the corporate world and went on to do things on my own, I think not that I was expecting anything different. It was an eye opener. And that's when you start to see who are people who really are there as friends, colleagues, peers who were there because of you as an individual, and people who had that relationship because of the seat that you were holding at a point in time, right? So it was a great learning and an eye opener and a reaffirmation of the fact that you need to stay humble, you need to stay grounded, if because that's the only way you stay connected and be successful in whatever you want to drive or define as success. um, to answer your question, how do I keep that piece sorted? I would say, meaning whenever I get in connect with any new individual, I first of all I start with 100% trust, if there is anything like that, rather than saying that, Santosh, if you do certain things, you will keep adding the points on the trust parameter, and then we will see whether you are trustworthy or not. I'm sure if I do that, you are going to do exactly the same, because we just emulate each other. uh, but more than that, what I've seen work for me is, I am pretty shameless if think that, I think I overstepped, or I should not have said something during a conversation. I do not think twice and don't shy away from reaching out and saying, sorry, Santosh, today's conversation did not go as well, and I am really, I did not like the conversation the way it was. And I would be more than happy and more open for you to vent out, because if that's something which gives you that ability to reconnect, I do not take that as something which is, I'm here going and apologizing, and Santosh just took off on me. For me, I can only control my emotions, but I felt the need to go and acknowledge and apologize, and I would make a go ahead and do that. And what I've seen is, and I think what I've also seen is there is nothing like over communication in any relationship, right? You need to keep communicating, even if it means that it is the same message over and over again, because if that's what is required to keep reminding, keep reiterating, and keep emphasizing that, this is what the core message that we've been talking about. uh, it needs to register at every point in time. But at the same time, I need to develop that sense where overdoing also may have a counter effect. How are you going to be managing that and building that sense? So I think it is about awareness. It is about awareness of your situation, awareness of your surroundings, and also awareness of the situation that the recipient is in that particular situation. Because if uh, it's almost like in a theater, if I can't and I'm talking about live theater, I'm not talking about movies, because in a theater, there are no retakes. You need to read your audience and you need to be able to uh, see whether they're engaged and you are able to convey the message to across to them. And are they present and enjoying that or not is also something you need to read, right? Because I think this is another learning I've had as part of, meaning most of us who work in corporates, we tend to do these town halls, meetings or presentations. There are two ways to deal with it. I've got a slide deck to go through. I will. I don't care whether somebody is receiving that message, or I need to be able to connect, and that's the primary objective that we are talking about. Slide deck is secondary; it can also be circulated later. So I think it is some of those early lessons, and like I said, learning from the leaders who I consider as role models has given some of those inputs at different points in time, and I would say that learning should not stop. I continue to learn because you know today's context, most of us tend to have this conversation. The new generation likes X versus Y. They don't get it. My point is, we also don't get it. Right. So, how are you going to bridge the gap if we keep pointing fingers at each other? So, I think it is just getting to the right balance. It is about uh, the only thing I control is myself
Mm.
and my response to the situations. And I need to be able to respond and adapt to the situations which are thrown at us. Um,
You. In fact, when you are talking about multiple levels of awareness, you might not have noticed that you actually spoke things that could have been put it into a consulting firm's 2 by 2 matrix, because you talked about self-awareness, you talked about awareness around them, you talked about awareness about the stakeholders. So in a way, you covered this whole spectrum of self-awareness and what we call a system awareness, and how does one operate with empathy, connections, and trust, where you emphasize. I think this is the right time for me to open up this to some of those questions people would have. I think had seen somebody texting that question, and in case if you wanted to ask that, you can actually tell to unmute your mic and you can ask a question, or if you want to type a question that me or any of my colleagues could read it for you, we can also do that. Let me know what you want.
I see a question which is talking about State Street, where a totally new challenge emerged in the last 2 years, and how was it managed? I think State Street in the last 2 years has gone through a significant change, right? We grew from a 7,000 people organization to a 22,000 people organization, right? It did not happen with organic growth. It happened with bringing two JVs, which State Street had in India, which was with HCL and Sintel. completely different cultures coming together. I think we are still in that phase of bringing the three different cultures, three organizations together, because it's one thing to say structurally and from an entity perspective, we are one. The biggest change that we are still going through is how do you bring the people, the mindset, the attitudes uh, of a of a singular organization that we are referring about, right? Because when we were talking about setting up these joint ventures with HCL and Sintel, there was a particular objective with which these organizations were set up. And now, the response which I gave to Santosh's GCC question, we are expecting everyone who's part of the organization to be an owner, a stakeholder, and a shareholder of the firm, and working towards one single client, which is the end client at the end of the day, which is custodians or sub-custodians that we service. So I think it is a ongoing journey. Um, I would say we've had our own shares of learnings, unlearnings, and I'm pretty certain we did a few things right and few we could have done differently. Uh, so that journey is still on. I would say another couple of years before we can say that we've been able to manage it at this point in time.
Thank you. Hussein has two questions, and maybe we can start with the second question. So that's a straightforward, but that might also answer the first one. How do you make sure local voices aren't lost in global decisions? Yes.
Thanks, Hussein, for asking. And this is one of my favorite topics, right? Because uh, if I have a voice, I need to use it, right? Uh, and this is where I keep requesting everybody who's part of the teams that it doesn't matter whether you get heard in the first instance or not, but if you, because you were not heard or you feel you will not be heard, if you're not going to be using your voice for communicating your opinions, observations, or anything else, uh, guess what? You are never going to be heard. And this is where it also becomes important that we need to start asking to be included early on in decisioning, because in global organizations, once the decisions are made, they are there to be implemented. But while the decisions are being deliberated and you can add your perspective, is your opportunity to get any of that incorporated in the ultimate outcome that we are looking at. Uh, but once that train has passed, it is indeed very, very difficult. And that's where, you know, I think it is about taking risks. And when I say it is about taking risks, it is about taking risks to contribute and also have a voice and raise it. Guess what? Somebody can at worst do is say, you talk too much or you talk irrelevant, but at least you will not be unnoticed.
Got it. Great. So I think, Hussein, that other question might also get addressed in that in a way, because the other question was when values of work norms clash between regions, what guides your decision making?
Thanks, Sunil, for the answer, and thanks, Santosh, for bringing this up. Santosh, if it's possible, if I can ask one more question.
Please.
Yeah. So, Sunil, thanks for this wonderful insights. Want to understand from your experience, how do you stay authentic as a leader? When your team's values, norms, and expectation different across cultures. Because when we manage a global team, so people come with a different expectations, values, and the work expectations. How we stay authentic as a leader.
Um, I think I would say it's very easy to stay authentic. Just be honest in the relationship. Uh, People, when you have a difficult message to communicate, uh, some people may not like the sound of it when it is received. But I think over a period of time, you start to build the fact that, I'm going to, um, so let me, sorry, step back. uh, Anybody who works with me in different capacities knows that, I like to take it straight and I give it straight, right? I play with a straight bat, since most people in this call will understand cricket. Uh, and in that instance, what happens is the ground rules of the relationships have been set up that, uh, I am going to be honest in that relationship, and I am going to communicate uh, as I see things, and I would expect exactly the same. So indeed, today I'm working with people across maybe 15, 20 cultures, or 30, 40 countries that people are representing within the organization. Uh, like I said, at times the initial bit may be more difficult for people to accept because stylistically everyone is different. But over a period of time, people start to realize that, it may be hard hitting message, but there was no malified intent. Uh, and there was absolute truth in whatever you were talking about. I may not like the outcome because that's not as per my expectation, but intent was absolutely not questionable. I think that's how you stay authentic and you just keep reiterating that message. That's
Great.
worked for me, at least.
Kausik has an interesting question. So he's asking, was there a window seat moment in your life that shifted how you look at people and culture? Fundamentally, he's asking, were you this good always or something changed? Were you in the earlier part somebody and certain incidents, as you mentioned, by the way, leaders whom you worked with. Is
Yeah.
there any other incidences that made a shift in your?
Um, I think by education, I studied psychology. I think I owe a lot to the subject because what it did is ability to analyze for yourself uh, how to read a situation, how to read culture, people within that, right? And like Santosh mentioned earlier, I my preferred seat whenever I travel is a window seat because I can be all by myself, or I can engage with people if I choose to, right? Or I have the entire universe to look out to, and just stay calm with that, and be yourself. Um, I won't say that, it's great to talk when you got facilitators like Santosh asking you questions and prepped you for some of the conversation. I've also learned it by making mistakes, and some of them were costly mistakes. But, I've also had one thing that worked for me is I don't tend to repeat the same set of mistakes. So I learn from my mistake, but I also have a philosophy where I say that, uh, take newer risks, learn from them. And I've also had one philosophy where I say it is always more difficult to ask for permission than for pardon, right? Which means that, I'm never shying away from taking risks, and then learning from whatever is an outcome of those. I hope, Kaushik, I answered your question. But again, like I said, I don't shy away from taking risks and learning from the mistakes or learnings thereof.
Great. We may have time for one more question if there is somebody who has question. Oh, there was a question from Sweta. How do you bring in ownership and accountability in each team member when you do the merger? Was my question. But I think even within the merger, this is one of the biggest question that leaders always bring. How do you really build that accountability and ownership? Yeah.
Um, I think when you have straight reporting lines, bringing accountability and ownership is pretty easy. Okay. We were talking about when the lines get blurred, when you work in a matrixed organization and matrix not just within the country, but you've got region and the global matrix coming through. Uh, there is not a singular line how you can build and get accountability and get people to deliver. There, it has to be a combination of whether I, as an individual, would also like to take accountability and ownership, right? Now, there would be situations where people tend to be very happy in the situation that they are in. They are content. They don't want to move any further or move any faster in their career because that's a choice that they have made. In which case, I think you just need to accept because the more you push, the more uh, negative connotation and more relationship erosion keeps happening, which is not helpful in a cultural context. And that also tends to rub off to some of the other individuals. So I think we need to very clearly understand that the objective that you and I are working towards, is there an alignment? Would you like to take accountability, ownership? Like I said, very easy when there is a direct line. When you're talking about global matrixed organizations, there it has to be a host of other things. And then you also should be able to understand any of these are going to have any consequential outcomes or not, both in terms of what is the risk of something not getting delivered, and if it is not getting delivered, are there consequences for the individuals in the mix as well, right? So, take an example. If we are talking about, and I always say, thank God we are not doctors or surgeons, because when I'm a surgeon, I don't take accountability at the operating table. um, there is a serious problem. But when we are talking about operations or any other roles that we perform, maybe the consequences do not have that far reaching impact, but it still does drive a message and drive a communication, which is where it is important that we get people aligned. But if people are not willing to, then I think it's a different discussion rather than pushing the envelope beyond what is possible.
Thank you so much. Hi. So they help others see beyond their immediate roles in a way to connect the dots and see the bigger picture. The last question, probably because we won't have time, is from Kaushik himself. Is saying that what would be your advice to leaders so they keep others, they help others see beyond their immediate roles in a way to connect the dots and see the bigger picture?
Maybe Santosh, you can help me with this one, given you've
Uh,
got, yeah,
yeah, because
sorry.
no, I am not bringing in, you actually mentioned it. So I will rephrase what you just said that. So the first thing is, what is beyond their immediate role? Think about each one of us. We have a role that we play, and we are clear. This is what we have been measured. The awareness about what is beyond. So one way to look at it is that how is this role impacting other roles, and finally the customer. So the ability to see. So some of the people have the ability to see, others, the great leaders, would say that you're not just putting a brick on others and just making a wall, you're actually building a beautiful mansion, but these are the pieces that you're putting in. So that's, so the first is to see in your people, are they able to see beyond what I'm doing today, how is really connected to the larger organizational goal. Just once that awareness is there, people also feel the pride. People feel that, wow, okay, it's not about what I do by logging in, but what the impact that I'm creating in the larger system. I think great leaders, and I have seen Sunil doing this personally, are people who actually paint this narrative and a picture so that people are able to see beyond the roles. That's 5 o'clock now, which is, I think 1 hour just passed by, and I hope there is no other questions. And I would love to thank each one of you who come for, usually we do this once in a month with a variety of leaders. And I thank each one of you who participated. I also use this opportunity to thank Sunil to making it live, conversational, from the heart and free flowing. And I think that's how I experienced you. And I'm sure most people who came, they experienced in the same way. And we'll be just going back with some thoughts that we could reflect and also reflect on our own style, what we are doing when lines are blurred. Do we get confused? Do we get over anxious? Do we push back? You said that that might not be useful. So thank you so much, everyone.